Thank you for joining WCTV's only national sports debate show, Plead Your Case. I'm Brock Owens alongside Carter Newcome and Joe Veneziale, and today we're talking about NFL trades, and it's been a crazy trade deadline, honestly, and then we're going to talk about what the greatest college football program of all time is, and since Halloween was just a few short days ago, who are the scariest and most intimidating people to ever grace a handful of sports? I'm excited for today, and I hope you are too. So sit back and relax, because it's time to plead your case. Welcome into Plead Your Case, and we're talking about the NFL trade deadline. It is behind us now, and fellas, let's take a deep breath because it has been a crazy one. And one of the biggest trades actually came a few days before the trade deadline. It was Christian McCaffrey headed from the Panthers to the 49ers for a second, third, fourth, and next year, fifth. Joe, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on that big trade?
Yeah, Brock, I mean, honestly, just put the simple fact of the matter that the San Francisco 49ers won this trade. I mean, Christian McCaffrey is, if not one of the best running backs in football when he is healthy. So it's just another playmaker for them. I mean, honestly, they have a stacked division out there in the NFC West. But nonetheless, I mean, CMC is making splash plays for them right now, and I believe they have picked up a very good acquisition at the running back position.
I mean, I got to agree that the San Francisco 49ers also won this trade. However, I will say this. They went all in because they have basically no picks left in their arsenal if they want to, if they need to retool other positions. So if there's other holes in this team, they're going to have some issues when it comes to that because Christian McCaffrey is a great player, but they gave up, I believe, 4 or 5 picks in return for Christian McCaffrey. So that's a big return for Carolina, who's going to start a rebuild.
Yeah, what Carter said last is really my biggest takeaway. The Panthers are going into a rebuild. They have a new coach now, so this was definitely just to get that off their plate, get more draft picks. Another trade that happened, and this one was today. A lot of trades have happened today on the trade deadline. One was Calvin Ridley, who isn't playing this year, suspended because he was gambling on games. Now he's going to be a Jaguar starting next year, Joe.
I mean, it's a fun fact that you bring that up, Brock, because Calvin Ridley was suspended for betting against his team to win against the Jaguars. But now he's on a Jaguars team, which, again, is not the best team in the NFL right now by any means, nonetheless. But with Trevor Lawrence at the helm, they have a young team, they have a good core squad, and especially with the loss of James Robinson, that is another acquisition that is tough. But I think that him and Zay Jones, in my opinion, one of the more underappreciated wide receivers in the NFL. I think they have a really young core, and that Calvin Ridley addition, for me, is a big win for the Jags.
Well, I think adding Calvin Ridley, obviously, when you had the best player in a trade, most people are going to go, oh, they won the trade, right? I mean, for Atlanta, I think this kind of works out for them because, the bridge is kind of already burned with Calvin Ridley, right? So when you add, you get just a pick in general for a guy that's probably not going to come back. You can say that's positive for your team, right? But when you look for the Jaguars, they add another weapon, like Joe said, for Trevor Lawrence, and I think ultimately, both teams kind of win in this deal.
A trade that happened once again today, one that kind of came out of a little bit of nowhere. I didn't even hear too many rumors about this guy. Bradley Chubb headed to the Dolphins for a first-rounder and a fourth-rounder next year, along with Chase Edmonds headed to the Broncos.
Yeah, honestly, in my opinion, that's a big pickup for the Broncos. Chase Edmonds is a very good, underappreciated back, in my opinion. But nonetheless, giving up Bradley Chubb, who has been on and off with injuries in his career so far, I believe the Broncos did win this trade, getting a couple picks for their, rebuild phase, if you want to say, with the new era in Russell Wilson. Not necessarily a rebuild, but a new era in that sense. But you got to give a star player up to acquisition, more picks, and I think Broncos won this trade.
It's obvious that the Dolphins are going all in this trade deadline. They're picking up an edge rusher in Bradley Chubb, right? They're getting rid of most of their picks, right? They're already having issues in the organization where they're getting some taken away from them from the NFL, right? And they lose one of their starting running backs in Chase Edmonds, who gets a lot of touches for this team. But they also were not done in the trade deadline. They also picked up Jeff Wilson Jr. from, I believe, the 49ers. So they're going in and they're replacing a running back, but they're going in to try to compete this year for the playoffs because they're having a great season so far. And like I said, they're putting all their chips in and they're going all in.
Yeah, Dolphins definitely look like a dangerous team. Like Carter mentioned, they got a pick taken away. The Dolphins came into this year with 2 first-round picks in this upcoming draft. They now have 0 going into next year's draft after picking up Bradley Chubb and then losing the other one because of the whole Tom Brady and that thing. So looking at another trade, fellas, the Ravens, division rivals with the Steelers, they're getting better. They got Roquan Smith, an all-pro linebacker, and they gave up a 2nd and 5th to get him.
See, Brock, I'm going to have to say that I don't think the Ravens won this trade, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, me and Carter have talked about this off camera as well. It's Roquan Smith, nonetheless, is a great linebacker and a great piece for this Ravens defense, but they went all in. And I don't believe that they needed to go all in, especially at the middle linebacker position where they have a pretty solid secondary and defensive line around that core defense. I mean, obviously, again, it is a pickup for the middle linebacker position, but they give up crucial picks. And yeah, me and Carter will agree on this one. I don't think the Ravens won, in my opinion.
Like I said, you kind of already spilled my opinion on it. I think the Chicago Bears, honestly, they got away with a lot this trade deadline. We're probably talking a little bit later about the Chase Claypool deal. They basically flipped, essentially, Roquan Smith for Chase Claypool and a 5th-round pick, although they did go through 2 different teams to do so. But when it comes to the Ravens, they have other issues on this team. Their wide receiving core is trash, to say the least. And you're getting rid of 2 picks, right, where you could use on those in the future. And on top of that, a middle linebacker in this day and age in NFL, it's valuable, don't get me wrong, but edge rushers and secondary, those are more important roles. This defense has had some issues thus far, but they still have other issues that they need to go after.
And another topic that you bring up with this Ravens team, I mean, they don't have a contract for Lamar either. I mean, Lamar is just bouncing off of these contracts, and just a middle linebacker, in my opinion, is not needed for this Ravens team.
It's an interesting it's not what I expected to hear, if we're being honest. I mean, I think Roquan Smith, I mean, you obviously know he's a great player, but I do think he was a great addition for the Ravens. And then Carter touched on the next trade I was going to talk about a little bit. Chase Claypool back to the Bears for a 2nd-round pick. The Bears did not trade the one they got for the Ravens. They traded their original 2nd-round pick, so that's going to be better for the Steelers because we figure, at least, the Bears are going to finish with a worse record than the Ravens.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Brock. But, I mean, in the Steelers' sense, it was a pretty straight-up trade, Chase Claypool for a 2nd-round pick in this upcoming draft. But as a Steeler fan and being around the media, seeing the media, we all kind of suspected it in that sense. But nonetheless, another pickup for the Steelers in the draft aspect, which I do personally love. But nonetheless, it is a straight-up trade. It's not really that big of a big trade, in my opinion, for the Steelers.
I mean, I think it works out for both teams. I think I've seen a lot of deals so far today that have kind of benefited both teams. Obviously, time will tell if it really does, but at face value, I mean, the Steelers with Chase Claypool, they're very good at drafting wide receivers, right? Regardless of the round or the year, they are able to pick up a guy regardless of that. And the Bears, they need a receiver, right? There's no weapons to throw the ball to for Justin Fields, so adding a guy like Chase Claypool should surely help them. And honestly, this morning, it seeming like Chase Claypool was probably going to be a Packer, maybe if the deal was done. And Chicago swiped in at the last second and said, here's a 2nd-round pick, and the Steelers like, all right, sure. And that was the end of it. So I think the Steelers are pleased with it, and I think the Bears have got to be pleased as well on their return.
Yeah, the Steelers also got William Jackson with future late-round swaps. There's a couple more trades I just want to hit on quickly, guys. TJ Hawkinson to the Vikings was one big deal, and then another one that kind of flew under the radar a little bit, I think, is Robert Quinn to the Eagles for a 4th-round pick. Quinn had 18.5 sacks last year, 2nd in the league, and I think that is really kind of sliding away, and people aren't paying attention to that as much since some of these other trades are happening.
I mean, honestly, Brock, in the TJ Hawkinson Vikings trade, I mean, Vikings are just 6-1 in the NFL right now. Great team. It's just another acquisition for their high-powered offense. I mean, Hawkinson has proven himself in Detroit as being a key part of that team. But nonetheless, you also bring up Robert Quinn to the Eagles. It's just another asset to great teams. And yes, it's very scary to see these guys go to these teams, and they're going to make big splashes. I fully, wholeheartedly, 100% seeing them do great things.
This NFL trade deadline almost seems more like a Major League Baseball trade deadline, buyers and sellers, right? You have a team like a contender like the Minnesota Vikings, right? Their tight end, Irv Smith Jr. gets hurt, going to miss probably the remainder of the year. You know what they do? They go out and they get TJ Hawkinson from a division rival. You look at the Eagles, look, they probably didn't suspect that they were going to be where they're at the beginning of the year, undefeated at this point. What do? They bolster up their defense and get Robert Quinn. So to me, their teams are buying because they're trying to get after a Super Bowl because they see it as a league that's more wide open this year. There's really only, it seems like there's 2 or 3 legit contenders, so a lot of other teams are doing what they can to put themselves in that conversation.
Yeah, definitely a crazy deadline we had, but we're going to be moving on here on Plead Your Case. When we come back, we're going to have our NFL Pick'em segment before we get into a college football GOAT program debate.
You're watching WCTV, where we aim to bring you the best local coverage of what you care about most. Everything from local businesses to hometown sports and the latest weather. We're keeping up to date with what you need to know about issues that affect our campus and our community. We're telling the stories that matter, celebrating our past, our future, and our potential. So tune in for all the latest buzz right here on WCTV Channel 14, Waynesburg.
Welcome back here to the Pick'em segment on Plead Your Case. My name is Anthony DiFilippo, and for the first time last week, we had a tie here on our Pick'em segment between Ethan Spozarski and Colin Rhodes, so it's only fitting that we bring the two of them back. Colin, we'll start with you since you technically still are the reigning champion. Philadelphia and Houston Thursday night. Who you got?
It's easy. Philadelphia, undefeated. Houston, they're one-win team.
I'm going to stick with you, Colin. I'm going to say Philadelphia wins this game.
Chargers in Atlanta starting the 1 o'clock slots on Sunday.
I'm going with the Chargers. Like Justin Herbert, I think the Chargers have been pretty good this year. And the Falcons, they've been good too, but not to the same level.
I agree. Marcus Mariota's good, struggling. Chargers finding their way. Give me Chargers.
Miami, Chicago.
I know the Bears just traded for Chase Claypool, but Tua looked really good last week. I'm going with the Dolphins in this one.
Yeah, the Dolphins look really good. I agree. I'll take Dolphins.
How about Carolina and Cincinnati?
This one, a bit of a risky pick, I think, but I'm going with Carolina for this one. I think P.J. Walker is going to do really good against the Bengals. And Joe Burrow, I'm not sure if he's going to bounce back that well against the Panthers, especially after this embarrassing loss against the Browns on Monday Night Football.
I'm going to disagree with you on that one. Cincinnati, honestly, to me, is the better team right now. Granted, P.J. Walker has done exceptionally well, but the Panthers are struggling defensively, kicking-wise as well. So they've missed 2 field goals and an extra point. At Cincinnati, Joe Burrow's due for a rebound, of course. Yeah, he is going to be without Jamar Chase, but I still think Cincinnati's defense rebounds. He's able to get Tyler Boyd and Trey Higgins involved as well. So for me, I'm going to take Cincinnati.
Interesting pick there, Colin, going with Carolina. Ethan with Cincinnati. How about Green Bay and Detroit?
I'm going to go with Green Bay. They've historically beaten the Lions a lot, so Packers.
Yeah, Packers due for a rebound game. I was pretty impressed with their second and third quarter during the Bills game, so I'll take Green Bay.
Indianapolis and New England.
I'm going with New England on this one. I think they played pretty well last week against the Jets, and then Indianapolis, they also played well against the Commanders, but they didn't win the game, so I think that's a pretty clear indication.
Yeah, for me it's the same. I'll take the Patriots in this one.
Division rival matchup: Buffalo and the New York Jets.
Buffalo all the way. The Jets, they lost pretty badly against the Patriots last week, and Buffalo's on a roll.
I agree. Buffalo's best team in the league, in my opinion.
Minnesota and Washington.
Minnesota, they just got T.J. Hawkinson at the trade deadline. That's another weapon for Kirk Cousins, who's also been really good this year. The Commanders, not that good, really.
T.J. Hawkins socks, welcome to a winning franchise, my good sir. Minnesota's going to win this game. Taylor Heineke, I thank you for your clutch up last week. However, I do have to go against you. Give me them Vikings.
Battle of the 2-win teams, Las Vegas against Jacksonville.
I'm going with Jacksonville on this one. I think they've been good enough so far this year. I think they've made some good adjustments on the roster in Las Vegas. They got shut out last week. That's hard to come back from.
I agree. I'm going to have to go with Jacksonville in this situation.
All right, Seattle and Arizona.
Seattle's been surprising. I'm going to go with them. Geno Smith, he's in MVP talks right now, as crazy as that sounds, and Kyler Murray isn't.
Geno Smith, best completion percentage. I think he completes the game and gets the win for the Seahawks.
All right, moving on to the 4:25 game, we got the LA Rams and Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I'm going with the Rams on this one. The Buccaneers have lost 3 straight, while the Rams just lost to a revamped 49ers team. And also, Tom Brady's going through some things outside of football. I'm not sure he's going to be there mentally.
I'm going to have to agree with you on this one. I'm going to take LA in this situation as well.
Good Sunday night matchup this week, Tennessee and Kansas City.
Going with Kansas City. Tennessee's been a great team, but Kansas City has been better.
Oh, Kansas City all the way, but Tennessee is going to provide a good game.
Our Monday night matchup this week, Baltimore bolster their team this week. They're playing New Orleans. Who you got, Colin?
I'm going with the Ravens. The trade for Roquan Smith was a really good trade for the Ravens. And the Saints, they're 3-5. Ravens are 5-3. I think the flipped record is a pretty good indication.
Give me the Ravens in this one as well. I couldn't agree more.
All right, that will wrap up our Pick'em segment this week. We only have one difference, so that means we will have somebody new on next week. Stay tuned for more sports content here on Plead Your Case.
Tuning in the previous episodes of Plead Your Case, you've seen plenty of GOAT debates, and I'm sure there's plenty to come. But today, we have a college football program GOAT debate, and Joe, we're just going to start it off. We're going to go to you right now.
Right now, Brock, it's kind of bold because I got that one team that has been true and dear to my heart ever since I was a little kid, and I believe overall, they are the best college football program in the nation and ever. That's going to be my and your Michigan Wolverines. 11 claimed national titles, 5 unclaimed national titles for whatever that means. 984 wins total on their program history. 3 Heismans, only one, the first primarily defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy. 85 consensus All-Americans, and the first team in 1934 to wear, the winged helmet. Give me my maize and blue Michigan Wolverines. Never lost.
Well, I don't know about the whole never lost thing, but we'll scooch past that. We'll go over to Carter. Carter, who do you have?
So for mine, it's the most, we'll say, decorated team in college football history. The team that's won the most national titles, it's the Yale Bulldogs. No, I'm just kidding. It's not. I'm not going to go Yale Bulldogs. I have to give credit where credit's due, right? Most of the national championships, let's be real, were before sliced bread was invented. But, they do have the most, and people do forget that. But it's pretty obvious. Brock, I'm sure you'll probably agree with me. I'm going to go with Alabama, right? But you got to give some mention to other teams. I'm sure Brock will tell you a little bit more about Alabama because I have a feeling that's where he's going to go with this. But look at some other, teams. Miami's up there, right? They were in the 2000s, one of the greatest programs in the history. Notre Dame, Ohio State. There's a big list, but none of them top the number one. That's Alabama.
Yeah, Carter kind of hit it right on the head. I think it's Alabama. I just think they're the best of all time. They aren't just the best of the last decade. That is pretty much unarguable what they've done the last decade. But before that, they had coaches like Bear Bryant, who held the record for most national championships won by a coach until that was broken by Nick Saban. And they've each won 6 at Alabama. Nick Saban has 7 overall because he won 1 at LSU. But just between the two of them, they have 12 national championships for Alabama, which is more than the 11 that Michigan has. So, yeah. And then they have another 3, by the way. Alabama has 15 all-time national titles with the 2 greatest coaches probably in college football history. So I just have to go with Alabama.
I don't see it. I don't see it, Brock. I mean, obviously, they are. as of recent, and you bring up great points of them having a prestigious program in all time, but you say 15 national titles. Michigan only has 4 behind. And Michigan overall, I mean, in their history, I believe, throughout the years, they're just a tenured team. And you think of college football, you look at the classics, you look at that yellow M that's full face in front in the one of the biggest stadiums in the United States, in the Big House. It's the Michigan Wolverines, Brock. They're not the Alabama Crimson Tide, and they are way better and always will be better than the Alabama Crimson Tide. I may sound like an idiot right now, but I'm sticking to my guns.
I hate to do this to you, but you guys aren't even. You're the second most dominant team in your conference. I mean, Ohio State's a better program overall than Michigan. I hate to say that because I do not like Ohio State. I'm going to put that out there. Not a fan of Ohio State by any means, but I mean, twice in the last 15 years you beat them or something like. It's not pretty.
Yeah, I think it's 1-13 in the last 14 matchups.
I mean, either way, just you look at the overall record. I don't know the full. The all-time, what should I say? The legit record in statistically, but nonetheless, it is Michigan overall in that all-time rivalry. But nonetheless, you guys look at that one rivalry. Alabama has how many in the SEC? You look at college football and you think of Michigan and Ohio State. Prove me wrong on that. I'm serious.
I do think
it is a 10-year
if we're looking at the best rivalry
in the history. It is. I think that plays a very big part into their program's success because they do feed off of that game, and it's been like that for almost 100 years at this point.
Yeah, they fed into that game last year and got curb stomped in the first round of the college football playoff. So
they still beat Ohio State 42-27. It doesn't matter.
That is noted. They did beat Ohio State last year, but I mean, statistically, they just get absolutely.
For Michigan, that was better than the national championship.
Was it?
Overall, Michigan has. People are saying yes.
Sources say
overall, Michigan does have the better record all time against Ohio State. It's statistically proven. I don't know the exact number, but it is statistically proven.
So is that me saying? So I said Yale has the most national championships. Does that mean they're the greatest? Because in the past, because Yale hasn't sniffed anything in the last.
That's your argument.
65 years.
Yes.
I mean, Michigan hasn't been better than Ohio State in the last 30. I would almost argue. So.
Okay. I don't know if you'd go that far, but I mean, in the 80s and in the 90s, Michigan used to wallop these teams, and especially Ohio State. It's the truth.
Well, I don't know about that, but all I know is that these are some great programs that we've had over time. So it's really up for you to decide who the greatest college football program is of all time. That's going to do it for that segment. And when we come back, we're going to have a little bit of a Halloween-themed segment here on Plead Your Case. We're just a few days removed from Halloween, and we've got a little bit of a segment to mirror the times that we're in right now, the holiday season. We've got scariest, most intimidating players over all time in a handful of different sports, professional sports. One of the most scary sports and most intimidating sports to think of athletes for would be football, I would say. So we're going to start out with the NFL. And we'll go over to Carter first. Carter, who are some of the most intimidating, scary people that you would not want to line up against in NFL history?
Well, I can tell you one off the top of my head for sure. Lawrence Taylor. I mean, that man was just, like he said, there was a mic'd up clip. He's like, we're going to go at him like a bunch of crazed dogs. I mean, that does not sound like a human being to me. I remember watching NFL films as a kid, and I'm like, I'm scared of this kid. And he's like, he played 20 years before I was even born. Some other guys I'm going to mention, I have to give him credit where credit's due. It's Mean Joe Green. I mean, the nicest thing that guy ever did for someone was toss that kid his jersey in that Coke commercial. I mean, I watched him kick and punt, and he walked off the field in Philadelphia after they were losing so bad. I mean, that was a man you did not want to mess around with. I'm a Steelers fan, and I'm scared of Mean Joe Green.
Absolutely, and you bring up a linebacker in Lawrence Taylor, and you bring up a Steeler fan in Joe Green, and I am a Steeler fan, and one of the people that I was scared to go up against, or scared to face as a Steeler fan, is Ray Lewis. I mean, one of the scariest linebackers in the NFL, and watching him at such a young age, it really did put a fear into my eyes when he would come off the ball against these Steeler teams, but nonetheless, I didn't know of the off-field antics of Ray Lewis, of the alleged wrongdoings that he did. And in my little kid mind, I was genuinely scared because, I mean, from what I was hearing, this man is a scary man on and off the field. So nonetheless, Ray Lewis is definitely up there, and his teammate in that Ravens defense, Ed Reed. Ed Reed would just lay the boom, man. I mean, it was just a scary, scary time to be a Steeler fan against those two.
Yeah, those two are great. Those two are very great. Those were two of the guys that I had down. I also had to go with a throwback. One of the scariest guys of all time would be Dick Butkus. And then also I had Brian Dawkins in there. He was a great safety alongside Ed Reed at basically the same time in the league. They were both laying the boom pretty much every single week. We're going to move on to a little less of a contact sport, but that doesn't mean that there weren't intimidating players in it. We've got the NBA. Carter?
I got to go. I have a couple as well. I have three to mention, but Kevin Garnett's going to be one of them up there. I mean, Kevin Garnett was a scary dude. I mean, did not want to be in the paint whenever he got a rebound because you're probably going to receive an elbow in your side of your face. On top of that, Bill Laimbeer, Bad Boy Pistons, was coached from a former Punxsutawney head coach, Chuck Daly, in the Bad Boy Pistons. He knocked my next candidate around, Michael Jordan. I mean, that rivalry alone, those are guys that I would fear if I was playing basketball because anytime you drove down the lane, you were getting tossed to the ground, you were getting beat up, you were getting punches were being thrown. Any of those three right there, man, those are some scary basketball players.
Absolutely, Carter. I do agree with all of your picks right there. But my number one in the NBA, it's Shaquille O'Neal, Shaq. I mean, 350 pounds of pure diesel running up the floor in his prime, and you're standing under the hoop. Yeah, no way for me. I think Shaq is obviously, not obviously, but statistically one of the most dominant centers of all time, and it just especially that size coming at you full speed is very scary. But I do have another player, which it kind of consensus off the Halloween theme. I'm going to have to go Rip Hamilton for the Detroit Pistons in the mask. I mean, just that guy would wear a mask every single game at a point. I mean, he didn't for a time being before he did, but when he did not take it off. And especially when players put on that mask that he did, they just go off for 60, like LeBron, 60 in that black mask that he wore. But I think it just started a very great trend of that scary theme, should say, when NBA players wear the mask, they just go off. So, yeah, I'm going to have to go with my man Rip Hamilton.
Yeah, another player I was thinking of in NBA history, he was ahead of his time. He had the size of a center today, but way back then it was Wilt Chamberlain. He could do whatever he wanted, basically whenever he wanted. I mean, that guy was over 7 feet, and he was a world-class athlete, pretty much unstoppable at the time. I wouldn't have wanted to face him in the 60s/70s either. Now we're going to go on to more fighting. Who would you not want to fight in a boxing match, Carter?
Deontay Wilder. He's 6'7", 43-2-1 overall, and 42 by knockout. I mean, you're just inviting yourself to go to bed early if you're taking him on in a fight. So definitely not someone I would want to fight against. 6'7", are you kidding me?
It punches like a freight train. Those punches from Wilder are ridiculous, but I do love that pick, Carter. But my pick is undoubtedly one of the greatest boxers of all time, if not the greatest boxer of all time. That's Muhammad Ali. I mean, he had every way to beat you. He knew how to beat you with quickness, speed, and power on that sense. And just, yeah, it's GOAT talk. We talk about GOAT talk with college football. But, yeah, we're talking about scary guys. I'm going to have to go with my man Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad, definitely one of the great of all times. I have to go with another great heavyweight. It's Mike Tyson. I would not want to fight that guy. He had the combination of maybe the hardest punches of all time. He had some of the fastest hands in heavyweight history, and he obviously had a pretty much crazed mindset. Of course, that got a little worse in his later years when he, the whole Evander Holyfield situation. But that's beside the point. He started his career 37-0 with 33 knockouts. He was pretty much unstoppable in his prime. We're going to the other fighting. We got mixed martial arts, UFC. who would you not want to take on in a UFC match, Carter?
Francis Ngannou, he's 6'4", 260 pounds. I mean, that's an absolute unit. Not to mention, he's also a brawler. I mean, just one hit alone from him could just knock you out. Good thing he doesn't box.
Absolutely, Carter. And another guy that I would be scared to go up against in the octagon is the Iceman, Chuck Liddell. I mean, I remember watching him when I was little in that octagon, and man, that man was a scary fighter. He knew how to beat you, and it's just especially technician-wise on that fight. The Iceman, give me the Iceman, but another one that I think you're going to pick, Brock, as well, is John Jones. In the octagon and off the octagon, just all-around scary dude, in my opinion.
Yeah, I had 2 written down, and he was my first one.
Yep.
If we're talking greatest of all time, that's my pick for the greatest UFC fighter of all time is John Jones, 26-1 all time. His only loss is actually a disqualification, so he really didn't lose that fight. He has the longest wingspan in UFC history with 84.5-inch arms. You're just not going to do anything against John Jones. But the other one I had written down is the all-time leader for knockouts. It's Derek Lewis. If he has the all-time lead in knockouts in UFC history, there's obviously something that he's doing right, and I wouldn't want to take a punch from him. And now we're going to go to one last thing where we don't usually talk about, but I kind of appreciate the respect for it. We've got a little WWE. Who would be the most intimidating person when they're walking down the ramp, Carter?
I mean, I think we're all going to say the same person at the start. When I was a little kid, The Undertaker would keep me up at night. So I'm not going to get too into detail on The Undertaker. I'll let you guys do a little bit more on that. But some other guys, I mean, how about Brock Lesnar? I mean, come on. I mean, that guy, even if it's WWE, is fake, right? He's just he can beat you up regardless of the fact. And then, of course, I got to mention Triple H. I mean, it's all about the game and how you play it, man. So you can't sleep on Triple H. You can't sleep on Brock Lesnar. But The Undertaker's, he's got to be my number one, so I want to hear what you guys have to say about The Undertaker.
I mean, yeah, number one definitely is The Undertaker. I mean, for a good time bit in my younger years, I thought he was actually undead, and, like, he was a ghost walking.
Does not surprise me.
It would just kick a lot of butt in the wrestling ring nonetheless from my younger years. But the next guy that I think is the most intimidating wrestler of all time, it's Goldberg. That man used to come down to the ring with a police escort, and 6 of them, and he would be chained to them, and he would just unleash, kill everybody that he was in the ring. I'm going to have to go with my man Goldberg.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that when we think most intimidating WWE of all time, we go straight to The Undertaker. That's who I had as well. A couple other ones that I had was Andre the Giant, throwback there, but he was also ahead of his time, kind of like my Wilt Chamberlain pick. There was no one like Andre the Giant at the time. He was just ginormous. And then I also just had to finish it off with one of the most iconic WWE fighters of all time, Stone Cold Steve Austin. When you heard the glass shatter,
What?
I mean, you just, what? What? Yeah, when you heard the glass shatter, you knew that he was coming down and he was gonna whoop some butt in that ring. But that's sadly all the time we have for this episode of Plead Your Case. Tune in future weeks and tune into the other content here on WCTV. Have a good rest of your night.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.